Hey everybody, hello and welcome. I hope you guys are having a beautiful day. I wanted to talk about a plant that's kind of near and dear to my heart. It's one of my all-time favorites, and I think I'm getting used to this filming thing and feeling a little more comfortable with it again. So hopefully these videos will be a little less awkward. But this over here is Anthurium. Anthurium andraeanum. It's just really quite a remarkable plant. This particular variety is called Utah, and it has these really interesting spathes, and it's just a really vegetative, just beautiful plant. I actually have a couple of them. Oh, I'm gonna put this down. It's in a big ceramic pot. Oh, this is another one. This is pretty similar. This is the flamingo purple. And it's just got this beautiful spathe. So, a few things that I want to talk about. These guys are called Anthurium andreanum. They're native to Colombia, Ecuador, I believe extreme northern stretches of Peru, sort of at the footsteps of the western part of the Amazon basin. They're a perennial plant. They are toxic to consume. I don't recommend consuming these guys. They'll give you a really, just atrociously bad stomach ache. Just don't do it. They are evergreen in nature. They're heavy feeding plants. These are the kinds of plants that really need a constant supply of water, or else they tend to shrivel. They can even, sorry, there's like a truck over there. They can even die down right to the stump. If you've never grown an anthurium before, one thing to note is they have these pretty succulent roots. It almost kind of reminds me of like an orchid, and I didn't actually know this until I got into anthuriums. Just right over here, I don't know if you can see. And they'll start to get a little bit of this kind of white haze when they're thirsty, and then they'll turn green when they're well watered. So I actually have to water this guy. Another thing I want to say about anthuriums is they come in all shapes and sizes, but this particular anthurium has this kind of sagittate heart-shaped leaf. These guys proliferate quite quickly. They're most efficiently divided via divisions. So I don't know if you can see here, and I wish my camera would work. It has a division right here, also known as a pup, and then it has another one down here. So if you ever want to divide these, I would wait for this one to beef up a little bit, get a little bigger, maybe another season. But this particular one over here, I think is ready. And the best time to divide these, I think, is probably September, where I live in the northern hemisphere. Just kind of in general, early fall if you have a multi-season climate where you live. If you live near the equator, just when it's a little bit cooler, especially cooler at night. This is definitely not the kind of plant that you want to keep out at night during the winter. It's not cold hardy down to... You know, it's more cold hardy than some anthuriums. You can probably get it down to about 5-6 degrees Celsius. But any cooler than that, it tends to just kind of turn to mush, especially down in this region here. So these here are aerial roots. Technically, if you wanted to do a top cut propagation, you can actually cut them right at a node. So I would cut this one between these two roots here, and then you can just root the top in water or in water and perlite if it needs something to hold on to. These guys here, anthuriums just in general are monoecious, which means that they're self-fertile. There's a few varieties out there, a few species that are dioecious, di meaning two houses, meaning that you need both a male and a female plant. They're not hermaphroditic, but this particular one is self-pollinating. It's got this spathe, and then inside it has this spadix. The spadix is basically, it looks almost like a catkin, and it's got these really sectoral scales. And you know what? It's probably easier if I show you the other way, because then I can actually focus my camera. But see how it's got those little scales that run all the way up. When this guy here is pollinated, and it's best to hand pollinate it with a toothpick, by the way. They're naturally pollinated by a whole host of different flies, but unfortunately here in Canada we don't have a lot of those flies to assist us. But this here will start getting kind of mucousy, and it'll start showing male pollen. And then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to transfer, ideally, from the spathe on one side of the plant, or even better on another individual plant, onto this guy here, and then you're going to want to wait. For me, last time I pollinated these, it was a really long time. It was probably 5 months until I got berries. So all the way up this stalk, you're going to get berries that start off as green, and they look kind of like pearls, actually. They start off as green, and then they become orange, and then red, and then in some cases a purpley color. They're very viable the first year, but I had zero success growing them from seeds after the second season, so I think they really do lose their viability after a while. One thing I will say with Anthurium andraeanum is they have this kind of separation in the leaf. This is called a sinus. And in this sinus, some of them are incomplete, kind of like an Anthurium forgetii, but for the most part, they're complete. So you'll know that your plant is older when it grows this big groove. As you can see here, the more juvenile leaves do not have that groove. They're more heart-shaped. So if you ever get this as a propagation and you want to grow it out and you want to see sort of how mature it is, look at that sinus there. If it dips like almost to the middle of the leaf, that means that's mature. Leaves on these guys are several inches wide. This here is by no means actually fully matured. Same with my other one. They can grow quite wide. They have more of a clumping mounting habit, but they can actually get a little bit of a stump to them. They can be a little bit more than twice as tall as this. As far as fertilizer regimens go, I feed this one every single time I water. I feed it with 10-10-10 fertilizer, so a balanced liquid fertilizer. I water this guy every Tuesday and Friday. It's been very hot here, so I've actually been watering a little bit more in the past couple of weeks. But interestingly, it's been pretty cold at night, so I try to water in the morning so the water has a chance to evaporate during the day, and this guy seems to like it. So a big thing about anthuriums is they do not like poor drainage. But my hair got cut in the plant. With that said, if you're gonna do a decorative pot like this cachet pot, which I have to clean because this has been outside all summer, you're gonna want to make sure that you have drainage in the pot and the inside. I use a lot of perlite in my potting mix for these guys just because they need that capillary air. If you don't do this and it gets too wet, you tend to grow algae and lichen and all that kind of stuff. And then it just kind of paves the way for disease, so you don't want that. One of my personal favorite things about Anthurium andraeanum in particular is just look at how glossy these new leaves are. If that'll load. Here, this is a good example. I just love how waxy they are. One keynote feature about all anthuriums is they have this really interesting veining pattern kind of right on the outside of the leaf. If I can find it. By the way, if you see scuffs and stuff on this plant, like injuries, that's because I dropped it off of my shelf. So sorry about that. I don't know if you can see, kind of right on the margin there, there's a little bit of like a ledge, almost. You can see it better on the new leaf. That's kind of a trademark feature of anthuriums. So if you want these flowers to stay as a cut flower, you're going to want to keep them somewhere cool. Remember, heat is your enemy with cut flowers. They'll turn brown very quickly, which maybe you want, because maybe you want to dry the flowers and preserve them that way. Then that'll be fine. But if you want to retain the color, you really want to keep them in a cooler area with good ventilation. And if you want to press these flowers, I recommend making an incision kind of right on the back. That's another thing that I've really been into lately. Kind of right on the back here. You're going to want to make a little cut where that petiole or peduncle, I can't remember the word off the top of my head, meets the spathe. So where it becomes flat, just a little incision. And then you're going to want to pull the flower forward and pull the spadix back. And then if you press that in between two pieces of wax paper and put like a hot iron on top, like a clothing iron, you can actually press these really nicely and frame them, which is kind of perfect for just displaying as art, because they're really quite an architecturally impressive plant. As far as pests go, these guys are spider mite magnets. You want to mist them regularly because spider mites actually hate moisture. These guys, I recently had a pretty nasty thrips infestation, and if you've ever had thrips, you know thrips are like the worst thing on the planet. Horrible pest, horrible to get rid of. These guys actually are quite resilient. Out of all of my Anthuriums, it's the andraeanums that have done the best, and I think that their resilience and hardiness is actually why they're so popular and mass-produced. I would transplant this guy when it gets root bound. They like being a little bit root bound. They'll bloom a little bit better for you if they're a little bit root bound. But I don't know if you can see here, it's just starting to form roots kind of near the surface. So it's about time for repotting. You're going to want to repot these before the winter season, so September, October, maybe late November if you're lucky and it doesn't get too cold where you live, because they do go into a bit of shock if it's too cold. And so yeah, this here is Anthurium andraeanum, also known as painter's palette or lace leaf, I think. I don't understand that name though, because nothing about this makes me think of lace. But it's a beautiful plant, highly recommended. Likes a lot of liquid feed. Kind of diffuse, indirect light. Kind of like what I have here, you know, undercover. Yeah. Have a beautiful day, you guys. Please stay blessed and have fun out there. I'll try to film more of these. Yeah, stay blessed.